Dear writer, you need to quit. This is the show that helps you know what to quit, what to keep, and what to question. My name is Becca Syme, and I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach with thousands of hours of coaching 6- and 7-figure authors, mid-listers, major award winners, and new authors alike, because everyone needs to quit something. Anyone can tell you what worked for them, and of course they say it might not work for you, but they can't tell you why. Well, I can tell you why. Welcome to the Quitcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of season 2 of the Quitcast. My name is Becca, and I'm going to be your host today. We are doing a Strengths for Writers episode where we take the Clifton Strengths profile and take each one of the themes individually, and we talk about what does it look like, what does it sound like, how can we develop it, and then what does it look like for writers to have this strength. That's the primary purpose of us doing these videos. So since we have done the last of our strategic thinking strengths, they have changed the colors. Gallup changed the colors to be more ADA compliant. So now they are green. And like Ellie says, they're green like growing. And so the strategic thinking strength that we're doing today is called Analytical. And recently, we have taken on a couple of new certified coaches. And one of them, her name is Elizabeth Zafra, so we call her Ellie. She is high in Analytical, and she definitely leads with Analytical. So we're going to do the coaching part with Becca and Ellie today. And so take it away, Becca and Ellie.
Analytical is a pattern seeker. It's really a certainty seeker. So it's looking for the essential truth. It's great at boiling things down to a single kernel that's very clear. Clarity, essence, all words that I would use. And it really comes down to patterns and being able to see patterns in data. Data can be almost anything, but
yeah, like that. That's the core difference for me with Analytical from anything else is that the data is usually concrete data. Whereas like with high strategic, they'll often look at abstract data or patterns in things that are more intuitive or things that you can read a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
But Analytical, it occurs commonly with strategic. So some analyticals are definitely like that as well.
Yeah.
But usually with Analytical, it's like, I need you to show me the data. I need to see it. I need the answer. We always sort of joke in Write Better Faster because we always know who the analytical people are before they take the test because of the way that they talk in class. And I'm always like, oh, that's okay. We'll give you all the answers you want.
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of analytical people have been accused, and this happens to me as well, and I know it's happened to you, of asking too many questions or of wanting to know too much or of being insubordinate because you're questioning the premise. So a lot of high analytical people are that skeptical. I don't trust it until I can see it for myself. So they have a lot more questions than the average person. They usually feel bad about it because they've been like taught by the data of life that it's not okay to have all those questions.
We're the people who never grew out of the 3-year-old why phase.
Yeah.
You know, why has always been a part of my life.
Yeah.
Why is it like that? How does it work like that? Well, does it work like that for a reason? Is there a better reason?
How do you know? Right?
Are
you sure? Yeah, like show me the numbers or show me the words or whatever, right? Like they want to see everything. And so rather than seeing that as a challenge, because it's about the sufficiency of information and not the validity, right? Like it's not that they innately believe that it's not possible for this to happen, although sometimes that is the truth because the data doesn't appear to fit in with other patterns that they've seen in the past.
Right.
But when they see new patterns, the balcony analytical should be very quick to be like, oh, okay, well, now I know, right?
Yeah. And it is and it's interesting because one of the things I hear from a lot of folks when we talk about analytical is the need for a trustworthy source or a verifiable source, someone who knows clearly, is knowledgeable in that area. And that actually makes me think of a question in terms of the theme dynamics with analytical. Does the trustworthiness of a source play more into, say, having relator or a knowledge level of a source being maybe with learner, something like
or
that?
input. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
I,
I would not argue against that, right? Like I do think that it is the theme dynamics always change a little bit with the strengths around it. I do think though that still trustworthiness is an issue with most analyticals. How do you know that, like, does that person know what they're doing? Because like, for
yeah,
instance, I
that
could
makes
write a
sense.
paper on physics and be like, this is the answer to all of the problems of the universe, everyone. Here's the cure for the coronavirus, right? Or whatever. And you're like, Becca, you're not a doctor. You don't have a PhD in physics. Like an analytical
Yeah.
would actually look at that and be like, well, how could you possibly know? And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people who are not high analytical see that as like a confirmation bias of some kind, like a confirmation bias toward academia. But that's
Mhm.
not the point at all, because anybody who's been through advanced degrees knows you are challenged constantly to
Yeah.
give up your assumptions. Like, it's not like, oh, they're indoctrinating me in academics. It's like what they're teaching me is how to think critically. So if
Yeah.
I haven't had to question these sources or question my own premises or understandings through academic rigor, then there's at least a likelihood, if I've had to do that, that I'm thinking critically about it. It's not a given, right? Because you don't know, but I'm not sure I would agree that it's confirmation bias, because I've just seen too many people who don't understand the rigor of critical theory of an analytical. It's not about the degree. It's literally about, like, have they had to pass a board? Like, has someone questioned them about this? Like, have you
Yes.
had to prove that this is true? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And if you haven't yet, you're going to prove it to me before I accept it.
Exactly. Exactly. Because like we'll often talk with
Yeah.
analyticals, because the only academic research that I did was 15 years ago, right? So, and I'm about to start another academic research project in another degree. And I keep thinking, like, I actually said to my sister, who's a number 6 analytical, like, I feel like I need this degree in order to be able to answer some of these questions for analyticals. And she's like, but you have so much clinical research behind you. Like, you don't need a board to tell you that you've done this, because you've been being critical about it. And I'm like, oh, right. Like I
But that
still,
is a source of self-doubt for high
oh,
analytical, is that,
yes.
well, why am I putting myself up as an expert on something? I don't have that background. I mean,
Yeah.
I may have read 50
Oh my
books and
God.
I've, spent 100, hours doing
But
training, and then
nobody
I
gave me
just
a degree for it. Right.
right.
Like, yeah.
Right. How can I put myself up as an expert? And yeah, there's always
Yeah.
that self-doubt, and
Oh, yeah. And
yeah.
again, that's about rigor. Like, I think it's really
Mhm.
important for analytical to understand, if I felt like there was a place that was going to rigorously and critically look at sources or bias or interest or whatever, the way that I felt like, say, a dissertation committee would, then I would
Mhm.
accept that as a feasible source. But I'm
Mhm.
not going to accept your Uncle Joe who just has decided that he knows the answer to all of life. I'm going to be like, Uncle Joe, but do you? Like, let me question you about this, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a clear basement too of
Oh, it totally
if
can be.
somebody's
Yep.
just taking the first thing that they heard, they're not searching for the right data. That's
Yeah.
definitely where everybody's like, "Wait, really?"
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's a basement potential for analytical, is being too certain,
Mhm.
because I have personally, like, let's say, I've searched out all the possible answers in all of the journals that I know about. Well, but if you're really analytical, you should still be open to other sources questioning the assumptions that you've come to, because if they're
Mhm.
legitimate, like if you're showing me
Yes.
legitimate data or legitimate facts, like I want to listen and question and think critically about it, and
Mhm.
then maybe change my opinion about the opinion. So I do think there's a basement of analytical that can be I have already decided. No more opinion
Yes.
required. Like, yeah,
Yes. Yeah. And
yeah.
sometimes that's made stronger with other strengths in play. You have a
Oh, yeah.
strong commander, a strong deliberative who's like, nope, we're already in that.
Self-assurance.
Yes, we're already going that
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
The strategic analytical can be like that sometimes because you have that sort of slow, data-driven, concrete
Yeah.
thinking style, and then the fast, intuitive pattern seeking. So you have both of those types of pattern seeking. And it could be a little bit dangerous, the assumption that I'm always correct about something because I have high analytical. Again, not that we want to encourage analyticals to be more rigorous than they are. I think for me, it's about watching for the basement of being closed to something because you've
Yes.
already decided. Yeah.
Yeah. The instant you say, I am not open to discussion on this,
Mhm.
that's the warning sign. Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And it's interesting because as a truth seeker, I think analytical is a big time truth seeker. It's do you want your assumption to be correct badly enough that you'll be wrong because of it? Like
Mhm.
that's a question that I would ask myself about many, many things. And some of it is how fundamentally have I built something of my own identity, thought process, critical theory
Yeah.
on that basic foundation. And as an analytical, I'm constantly learning things about things like psychology and like growth mindset and neuroplasticity recently have been the big ones for me that as a high analytical, I had to read and think and listen and think about like how does this fit in with what I know to be true about how the brain works with development. And it's been really interesting assimilating all of that because what I find is if the theory is sound, it won't be affected by something that appears to challenge it, right? So like
Right.
that's where the analytical gold is, I feel like.
Yeah, and you used a great phrase in there because it's about assimilating with what you already have. So
Yeah.
you're taking the new pattern and not just overlaying it on top of the old pattern, but integrating it, and
Yeah, like
that's
checking at
really
every
key.
point.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's
Like
really key for
how
analytical.
does this fit in with this? How does this fit in
Mhm,
with that? Show me this data. And
mhm,
for me also, I want to not just look at the data that someone else has gathered in their research, but also look at how that might fit in with the data that I gathered and how does that
mhm.
change my assumptions and et cetera. And I feel like
Right,
anybody who's high analytical should be able to suspend their own theory for long enough to be able to go through that process. And
mhm,
it's one of the reasons it's interesting that analytical gets a reputation for being so closed minded. Because I actually think of all the people who are open minded or should be open minded about thought process, it would be a high analytical because it's like, well, if you've got data to show me, like I don't just want your Uncle Joe's wild ramblings, like
right.
literally show me the data and then I'll consider it.
See, but and yet I understand why the closed-mindedness comes. It's because you're asking someone else who most times is not high analytical, maybe
Right.
can't communicate that
Mhm,
data, the steps
mhm.
to get there really clearly. And so they're like, you don't need that. Why do you need this? Why are you so close minded to moving forward? Because again,
Right.
analytical doesn't want to move forward until they have that information.
Yeah.
And so it's to other people, it's like they use closed minded as a, instead of saying, you're just being slow or you're asking for too much. You're asking me
Right.
for something I can't give you.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because that those things hurt. And those labels are clear.
Right. They do. They are hurtful. And this is why we talk about barrier labels in addition
Mhm.
to basements and balconies when we talk about strengths, is
Yeah.
because the way that we talk about other people's strengths
Mhm.
also has an impact on them. Right.
Mhm.
And so we have to be really conscious of how do I label things that I don't understand? How do I label thought
Right.
processes I don't understand? And analytical is one of the ones that's up there. And now we've come to the part of the video that we call the Strength for Writers talk show, where we take three writers that Becca, I have selected in order to let you hear what it sounds like to have this particular strength. And I'm going to let the writers introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into the talk show part. And so I'll see you on the other side.
My name is Alex. I write romance, although I started in young adult. Analytical is my number one. I think with analytical, the ones that I have noticed them working together with is is focus and maximizer. Focus, maximizer, achiever, analytical. That suite of things together tends to be my powerhouse. And I don't know if it's by virtue of what those strengths are or because I have learned to lean into them. I'm more comfortable leaning into them and I understand them a lot more than my whole suite of other things. But those tend to be my powerhouse strengths.
Nice.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I'm lucky enough to be one of those indie authors who managed to earn a good income on just a couple of books a year. Published my first novel in 2016 after analysing, of course, that the indie market offered a much better chance of replacing my day job. And I've been about full-time for almost 4 years now. Started out writing funny mysteries under kind of like Jeanette Ivanovich, but I'm in the process of transferring to urban fantasy under a pen name Isla Frost. And I'm analytical number 2 and have spent a lot of time in both the basement and the balcony of that strength. I think I see it working together with my input and my individualization and my deliberative, most of all, I think.
I write romantic thrillers, and then I'm actually transferring also into a new genre, urban fantasy, as well. Nice. My analytical is also number 2. Some of the strengths around it that, even though it's a completely opposite, I think it works well with it, is my empathy rate, sitting beside it at number 3. And they kind of shave off each other's basements, I think. And then I got learner in there, and so I just go crazy sometimes with analyzing stuff.
Yeah. And the core of analytical is really about finding that truth or the thing that's the most right or correct. We talk a lot about how analytical has clearness or clarity as its gift that it brings, because one of the things that was interesting, you wouldn't have heard this because you weren't listening before we started recording, but Alex and I were having a conversation about my significance as she kept asking these clarifying questions, getting closer and closer to the truth of what the real strength core is about. And that's something that analyticals do very naturally, right? It's like, is that really where it's coming from? Is that really what you're saying? Is that the truth? Is that the most precise or clear thing that you could say about that subject? And that's the gift of analytical. And I think something that Chelsea brought up about the balconies and the basements, right, is that sometimes when that goes to a dangerous or difficult place with analytical, we can become so conscious of wanting that clarity or that truth that it becomes hard to land somewhere. And so that's definitely the difficulty with high analytical. Although I will be honest, I like those moments, right? Like I sometimes like those 3 days that I lose researching something because I really, really need to know the exact right answer or the right why. So I'm not even sure sometimes that I agree that it's a basement. Other people might, but yeah. So if you were going to explain analytical to someone, how would you explain it? And let's start with Alex.
It's to me, analytical is about stress testing every idea or premise that comes across the radar. So somebody says X, and my first reaction is really. Prove it. And I don't mean that in a confrontational way, but let's see if we are really talking about that. And if we are, then if we can all accept that that is in fact correct, that what conclusions can we thus make because we've discovered that X is correct.
Exactly. Yeah, we talk a lot about analyticals being rigorous, right? And the reason for the rigor is because we're going to draw conclusions about the data, and we want to make sure that we're getting the right, correct, not just information, but also that we're seeing the right, correct patterns. And sometimes that takes a lot of question.
I think it's what you said before about getting to the essence, the core truth of something. It is, and I, without even realizing it, I dig at something. Like if someone has said something, I will just ask a question and a question and a question, and I don't even realize I'm really doing it until I can wiggle my way in there and find out what's going on, where the information is coming from. I have to question that. I need to respect the teacher or the source before I will believe it as well. So there's another aspect to it, a deeper level.
Yeah, I think analyticals have a natural ability to tell whether someone who's speaking or teaching really knows the answers, like by the way that they respond to the questions. And a lot of analyticals have a natural ability to kind of get at that person who really doesn't know what they're talking about in that way, so that they can say, okay, I'm not going to trust that. Like, I'm not going to trust that source. And so to people who don't have analytical, that comes across as a very confrontational, but it's never meant that way by high analytical people. We're always trying to be helpful or to understand, but it's just that most people, like if another analytical asks me questions, I think all of you have taken Write Better Faster. So you know how I am in that class, right? I'm like, ask the question. Like, I want to know what your questions are, because in asking questions, we understand better. And when analyticals ask me questions about stuff in class, I get to know the material better because of how they ask the question. So it's helpful to me to be able to have analyticals pounding me with those questions. So I never think that they're bad, but it almost takes another analytical person, which I have it in my top 10. And so it takes another analytical person or someone who just really likes curious people to be able to handle it.
Or if you're telling the truth to begin with, then you don't have a problem with us.
That's true too. That's true too. But also there are some people who, even if they are telling the truth, they don't know how to parse apart the way that you all will ask, especially top 5 analyticals will ask these very insightful, incisive questions, right? Like almost you're getting at the exact point of where the two pieces of data come together and trying to pull it apart and understand how are those two pieces of data different. And if people can't think on that granular of a level, they may not be able to answer your question, and like they may not be able to get to that essence.
I agree that, that wanting to understand and getting to the heart of things is a really big part of it. I do ask a lot of questions, and I actually used to do copywriting, and the first thing I would do is interview a client and ask them so many questions, because it would just help me understand what they really wanted. And sometimes they would say, I wasn't even sure what I wanted, but you asking me these questions clarified a bunch of stuff for me. So I definitely see that side of it. And I think the other side of it is making good decisions. Like I do just want to look at the data and, weigh things from all sorts of angles before I make a big decision. Sometimes that is a wormhole, and it doesn't mean I don't have blind spots, but I definitely want to do some research and understand something before I'm trying to make a decision. And it also means, if I can't find good quality data or if the data isn't pointing clearly one way or another, it can make me get quite stuck and frustrated, because I want to know the right way to go. And sometimes there isn't the information to back it up. I think what you were talking about, helping people, Becca, like I think this is probably part of my individualization and deliberative, but during a conversation with someone, I'm just automatically analyzing everything they're telling me, like both with and without words, trying to understand them and help if I can. And I think that's usually a balcony. But I do struggle when they have a different decision-making style to me and make choices without considering all of the possible outcomes, especially if there's someone close to me and I think it's going to make their lives harder. on the other hand, like if they choose the harder road after decision, like after weighing up all that data, then that's totally fine. I really want to help them think things through, which again, I'm sure is partly deliberative too, but there's a real analytical thing going on there.
I was going to ask that, Becca, what Chelsea described, a lot of it sounded deliberative versus analytical. Where do you draw the line?
Usually it's, I usually draw the line at the decision-making part with deliberative, but when they act together like that in concert, the primary deliberative is the weighing, right? So, because a lot of high analyticals really do want to make the right choice, and that comes from the desire to be right or correct. But what she was describing about like weighing from multiple places, that's often a much more deliberative. Like I don't do that with my analytical. My deliberative is 20 or 29 or 30, somewhere around there. So I don't do that. But someone with a higher middling deliberative probably would, but definitely those of you who have that in your top 5, you almost won't be able to pull those behaviors apart.
So my analytical confirms that it's cold outside. My deliberative decides whether in fact I should go walk the dog or not.
Yes. Yeah, I love
and it might take you a day to figure that out.
One of the core analytical precepts is that if it takes a day, I'll take a day. If it takes 5 days or a month, I will take that time because I want to gather the data correctly, and I want to gather it as exhaustively as is necessary, right, to make the decision. Those of us who have high input might gather more data, or high context might gather more than someone without that would gather less. But definitely if it takes a day to decide, I'll take a day. Yeah, I love that. So since learning about analytical, how would you say you see this acting in your life?
So in my writing life, it's more when it comes to business decisions more than anything. It's like marketing and things like that, and that I can analyze before I make a move. And then in my personal life, when people come to me with ideas, my husband's in business, and he'll come with these ideas, and I will basically play devil's advocate and ask questions and all that kind of thing. So I like it. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. People who are on the receiving end of that don't always understand where it's coming from. So I always encourage analytical people to say, like, do you want me to be helpful here, or do you just want me to support whatever you say? Because I used to date someone who was very, very low in analytical, and I would say, like, do you want my analytical on, or do you want my positivity on? Because I can do either one, but I'm not going to just give you the analytical because I feel like it's a gift. I feel like analytical is a gift. If I'm going to poke holes in your ideas, it's not to make you feel bad about yourself. It's because I know you'll come up with something better than that if I poke the holes in your ideas or ask you the questions. But not everybody likes that gift, right? So I had to figure out who my audience was on that. Yeah, I feel that. I feel that so much.
And then I can put my holes in my plot as well. Like,
yes.
So,
which is so good, because then you have plots with integrity. I appreciate that about analytical writers. Chelsea, what about you? How do you see analytical in your life?
I mean, again, that wanting to understand why and getting to the heart of things. I do the same as Trish. My husband has a lot of ideas, and we talk about them. And he actually, I mean, I'm lucky because he appreciates it, because it means if something, I guess, passes the test, like it's a good one, and he uses that and enjoys it. But like you said, not everyone would. And for some people that feels threatening or, just uncomfortable to be questioned. So yeah, I think my individualization probably helps me not tread on too many toes there, luckily.
Yeah. The helpfulness or unhelpfulness of question asking. Like I had a boss who used to call that insubordinate. Like when I would ask questions, he would always be like, "You're not on my side, Becca." And I was like, "Dude, I'm always on your side. That's why I'm asking you all these questions. If I
Mhm.
wasn't, I would shut up and let you be an idiot on your own. Like I would never try and save you if I wasn't on your side." And I think that like insubordinate word has always been a
Hmm.
painful one for me as an analytical. I see you guys all shaking your heads, yes, about
Hmm.
that. So yeah. Alex, what about you? How do you see it in your life the most?
It helps me answer the question of um, why isn't everybody else asking this? It's easier to explain with example. Let's say in an author form, somebody says, "Oh my God, guys, I tried this new service, technique, whatever. My sales tripled overnight." And then everybody is going, "Oh my God, give me their uh, website and you're a genius. And how do I do this?" And I'm going, "Guys, why doesn't nobody asking what your sales were and what are they
Were
now?"
That
Because
was my
if
first
it,
question.
right, because if it tripled from one, a book a week that you sold and now you sold 3 books a week, that is not the same as, I was making 500 a day and suddenly it's 1,000 and it's 1,500. Those are very different things. And
Yes.
with analytical, I realized that before I knew I was analytical, it was either, oh, is that a inappropriate question to ask, or does everybody except me know the answer, or does that not matter? Once I've identified that I'm high analytical, I know that it's just something that happens to occur to me first, and it may not be something that occurs to other people first. So it's given me a confidence to trust those questions that come up in my mind, even if other people who I respect a lot may not be asking them first thing.
That's so true. Another place I think people see high analytical in their day-to-day life a lot is that not accepting things on the first blush, right? Like that skepticism of, well, you say that, but I'm going to probe a little bit to see if that's really true. Because I think we innately know, like, there are high positivity people out there who just think everything is rosy and wonderful. And I have a slightly different way of internalizing data. So I know that I can't just trust the very first thing that people say sometimes, especially certain people. Like I learned those patterns. But that can come across as being very skeptical and mistrusting. And again, I think that's a misunderstanding of analytical, that skepticism can be really healthy. So if we just believe everything everybody tells us all the time and don't ever question the premise of anything, then we end up believing false information. And so, like, I think that skepticism of analytical can be super helpful. Um, so how do you see analytical reflected in your writing?
For me, analytical is so inherent that I can't really see it in like the actual stories I write, beyond wanting my protagonists to make smart decisions and ensuring that the world building and each character have a consistent logic behind them.
Yes.
Um, it's funny because I'm aware people in real life aren't necessarily as rational or consistent as I make them out to be. But yeah, I mean, analytical loves that rational, logical consistency, I think. And so that comes out that way.
Yeah. Alex, what about you?
For me, it has to do with how I construct stories. So, for example, my analytical will look at the plot, at the how plots work, like save the cat plot structure, and it will say something really big needs to happen now. Now, I may not know what that big event is or how in the world I'm going to get my characters there, but what I'm starting out with is knowing something big has to happen, or they just had this happy thing, something, somebody's hopes have to be crushed right about here. All right, what can I crush? Let's take
Yeah.
a look. What can I start crushing? Way being money mo. But that's a different approach than I know a lot of my high ideation friends have, where they have, well, 2,000 things can happen right now. Let me pick the one I like best. For
Yeah.
me, it's what must happen, what can fit into that.
Oh, I like that. And that's that analytical creativity, right? Which is very different from what we were talking about before with the ideation creativity. They're very different animals, but they're both equally creative. And that's super important. Yeah, I love that. Trish, what about you? How do you see analytical in your writing?
A few things actually. One, like on that same the plot structure, but for me, it comes in revising. Like, and I have to have that, or I know I can find the holes in that plot structure, and I can know that here's my midpoint. I need something here, you know. So I think it's a little bit innate when I'm first writing, and then afterwards, and then so another part of that is that compliance factor. Like I was writing military thrillers, and I needed to know what exact weapon that the Navy SEALs were using at this moment today, you know, and I'm going through and what is like the stuff I Google is insane.
Yeah.
So, but because I want to be correct, and romance readers don't really care that much, but I have to be correct. And then when I get stuck, it's so weird, but I realize I write questions to myself, like what is the problem here? What's happening next? Who's, you know, what does he need to do next? Say the hero or whatever. And that helps my brain think if I ask it questions while I'm writing.
Yeah.
I think that's analytical. I'm not sure.
Oh, yes. Yep, absolutely. In fact, Ellie and I talked in the video just previously about the difference between analytical stuckness and intellection stuckness. So, like, analytical stuckness is very much about the data that's in front of you, almost to the point where you could write things down and analyze them. Like, this should happen, or should that happen, or that. And that stuckness of like trying to make sure that you do it right is different from the intellection stuckness, which is I don't see anything yet, right? Like I don't even see what could happen. And that's a super different style of stuck. So granularity, and of course, that's my analytical, right? Like granularity is something that's really important to me when talking about strengths, because this is why I say if we know where it comes from, we can help you figure out how to fix it, because it's that diagnostic tool of, oh, that's your analytical, that's your deliberative, that's your individualization. Well, now I know exactly how to fix that because I know where it's coming from. That's the most analytical thing that I've said all day. And I say it all the time. I'm so pleased with the writers we had today. They did such a great job talking about what it sounds like to have high analytical as a writer. And one of the things I think is important when you watch the Strengths for Writers videos is when you have this strength high enough that it matters, high enough that you're feeling a lot of resonance when you listen to this video and listen to these writers, taking action on developing this strength or any strength that you have high is so important. And that's one of the reasons that we are now offering things like our Patreon to the people who've already been coached by us. We have a coaching levels on the Patreon as well, so that we can really dig into the development of these strengths with individuals, because it's so important for us not just to have the information out there, but also to focus on development. The second piece of that is that as soon as we get through all of the strengths, which I'm hoping will be done within a few months, just because now I really want to get them all out there. Once we get through the initial videos about the strengths, we're going to be focusing in on developing the strengths. And so that will be our next sort of strengths for writers part of the quick cast. And of course, we also have the question, the premise episodes as well that we're going to continue to do. We're also hoping to do a series in 2021 about success in writers that takes into account things other than strengths, because I am writing a couple of books about that currently. One of them, which is the long-term sort of vision, is that our coaches have been working on developing some success archetypes for authors. And that book is going to be called Dear Writer, You're Not Alone. We're hoping that will come out in early 2021. And then the book that's coming out this year, which of course it's 2020, is called Dear Writer, It's 2020, big shock. And we are actually have that up for pre-order right now. And so that will be up in the show notes and you can check that out. And that should be releasing on the 11th of December. Terry was challenging me to release it in 2021 because of course the initial opening chapter is all about the fact that 2020 is becoming a metaphor for something, the word 2020. So it's now no longer just a year that we've all been through, but it's sort of that metaphor for the dumpster fireness of 2020. And so the book itself is about why are things not working out? Like, why am I not doing whatever it is that I want to do? And so we're going to talk a little bit about success roadblocks in that particular book. And I'm hoping that you will enjoy that. We've been releasing chapters to the Patreon as I've been writing them and getting them edited. And that's been a lot of fun because I feel like the process of writing a book in community when the whole book is basically about the community of writers has been a lot of fun for me. And so I hope that you will check that out and I hope that you enjoy that. And as for now, I'm going to sign off. We have a couple more Strengths episodes coming up. We're putting them out as quickly as we can. And I hope that we will get through them all as quickly as humanly possible. I hope. So thank you all so much for being here today. I hope that you have a great week this week. I hope everyone is doing well and writing. If you are doing our nano-ish challenge where we're doing 50 hours of writing or editing, plotting, planning instead of 50,000 words, you can join us on our Discord channel to do those daily sprints. You can join us on our Facebook page where we're doing a strength a day, essentially at 6 a.m. Mountain in the morning every day for 34 days in a row. And that's our nano-ish challenge. And so you can check that out on the Better Faster Academy Facebook page, and that will be in the show notes. And of course, if you're watching this after November of 2020, the videos will all still be up and you can see them, but the contest ends on the 4th of December, 2020. So, and we are giving away prizes. I think I was on here before talking about we're giving away a Nintendo Switch to the winner and to a randomly chosen winner, but to the winner. And we have a couple of other grand prizes as well. We're giving away, trying to remember, I think we're giving away registration to the conference and some books and some other things. So, but that'll be on day one video of the Nano-ish Challenge on our Facebook page if you're interested. So I hope you'll all check that out. I hope everyone is having a good November. Even if you're not writing words for NaNoWriMo or our Nano-ish, I hope you're having a good month and getting lots of manuscript time done. And I will see you on the next Quick Cast. Bye, everybody.